Ow! Greetings, YouTube. This is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. Alright, this is something that I had been meaning to get out for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a couple of years now since I'd moved to where I am now. And I really feel bad for holding back for as long as I had. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I was being lazy, which is probably the reason. But finally, and really because now I think is the best time, because this particular author whose book series I'm going to be reviewing has started up a new series connected to this one. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present to you The Saga of the Seven Sons by Kevin J. Anderson. Now, Kevin J. Anderson, you might know if you've read some of the Dune books. When Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, his son, received some of the unfinished manuscripts and notes and things like that from his father that were, I believe, kept in like a safety deposit box, he worked with Kevin J. Anderson to bring those books to life. These were notes that talked about the history of the human race and the Butlerian Jihad and all these things, and the the history of the various great houses in the Landsrad, and so on and so forth, and even notes for the completion of the Dune series, which unfortunately Frank Herbert never lived to finish. Of course, for those of you who are big sci-fi buffs and who read a lot, of course, you know that the Dune series written by Frank Herbert ended with Chapter House Dune, but there were two other books that he had never finished, and so with the help of Kevin J. Anderson, Brian Herbert managed to finish those. Now, I'll talk about that another day, because all I can really say about it is I've read those books, and I do like Kevin J. Anderson's writing style, but he probably wasn't the best pick. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because that kind of has to do with some of the things I want to say about the Saga of the Seven Sons. Regardless, Kevin J. Anderson has shaped up to be one of my favorite sci-fi authors currently. The reasons why his books are relatively easy to read, and he has a good way with words, the situations, and characterization. Oh my God, his characterization is incredible. Now, the Saga of the Seven Sons, getting back to that, is a 7-book series. It's written through a time throughout 2002 to 2008, and consisting of 7 books and 1 prequel book, which was actually a graphic novel, which I own. I've actually owned, I think, about 3 of the books, and all the others I just rented from the library. And I just got so voraciously wanting to read more and more of these books that I just ended up buying the last few. The first book is called Hidden Empire. The second is called A Forest of Stars. Number 3 is Horizon Storms. Number 4, Scattered Suns. Number 5, A Fire and Night. Number 6, Metal Swarm. And number 7, The Ashes of Worlds. Now, this story takes place in the, I believe, 23rd century, where the human race, with the help of an alien race called the Illyrian Empire, has basically been given the stars. The human race had first sent out generational starships to find new homes for humanity because the Earth was becoming overcrowded. And these generational ships ran into ships that were part of the Illyrian Solar Navy. They made first contact with humans and guided most of the ships to habitable planets where they could live their lives, and then went back to Earth and relayed the information about what they did to help out the human colonists, and had sought out all the other colony ships. Now, one, the human race believes was lost, but that's part of the story. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. You can read about that particular lost colony in the first prequel book, The Veiled Alliances. But so what we have is a setup, which takes place, I think, 200 years after first contact between the human race and the Eldirans. And what you have now is, with the help of the Eldirans, which have given the human race their first star drive, which is powered by a fuel called ecti, which is mined from gas giants, the human race have spread to a whole bunch of different worlds and formed what's called the Terran Hanseatic League, which is ruled, in truth, by a chairperson of the board, but they use a figurehead king as if any of you have ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, this is a very classic example about a leader diverting the people away from power. And so this king is little more than a figurehead and a puppet who does everything the chairman tells him to. And when his time is gone, they pick a new king in secret and raise him as a prince and make him the successor to the king, pretty much making a sham royal family that supposedly rules the Hanseatic League. And of course, the Eldiran Empire is a friend to the human race. The Eldirans, I'll get to them in just a bit. As the story is set up, you have the Hanseatic League and you have the Eldiran Empire. And as it says in the first book, for all this time, the humans of the Terran Hanseatic League have known only two other alien races in the known universe. One harmless, the other extinct. The other alien race that they've come to learn about is an insectoid race called the tuckuss. But all that is left of the tuckuss, it seems, is the empty shells of their ancient cities. No one knows what happened to them, why they died out, or where they went. But what's left of the tuckuss are these robots that were supposedly servants, but the robots claim to not remember what happened to their tuckuss masters. And the Eldirans really don't pay them much mind. So you have a very stable situation. Now, the thing about Kevin J. Anderson is that he loves to play out the best laid plans kind of scenario, where just throwing a pebble in the water causes these massive ripples. And that's what happens in the Saga of the Seven Sons. These xenobiologists that have been searching the tuckuss ruins have found treasure troves of ancient technology. The tuckuss were masters of some severely advanced technology, which the human race has been trying to figure out for a couple of centuries now that they've been excavating these ruins. One particular archaeologist, has stumbled upon a particular type of device simply called the tuckuss torch. A device that is able to ignite gas giants and transform them into stars. So the Terran Hanseatic League is able to now create their own solar systems by doing like what the monoliths did to Jupiter in 2001, transform Jupiter into a star. And so, even though these stars are not going to be very long-lived stars, maybe it will have a lifespan of a few million years rather than billions, like a main sequence star. So, but unfortunately, the result of the tuckuss torch is unbelievably horrible. You see, the tuckuss and the Eldirans were not the only two races. Not by a long shot. And this is how the war begins, with the reappearance of races who the human race had never even known about. Particular one that starts everything off called the Hydrogues, which is this race that lives inside of gas giants. And what the human race did in utilizing the tuckuss torch was they accidentally committed an act of mass genocide against the Hydrogues. So the Hydrogues, in turn, forbid the human race or even the Eldirans from mining any of the ecti out out of any of their gas giant worlds. For the time, they didn't care. But when they did this, the Hydrogues were not interested in reparations. They have nothing. We have nothing that they need. They just gave an ultimatum, and of course, ceasing all mining operations on a gas giant would be would have just destroyed all interstellar commerce. And so this is an act of war. And so the human race goes to war against the Hydrogues, who are massively more advanced than they are, with these ships that seem to be made of solid diamond that can basically turn entire planets into ice balls. So the stage is set for a war that becomes more and more hopeless with every passing year, combined with the introduction of other races aside from the Hydrogues, and developing a lot of different secrets that have lain dormant for thousands of years in the Eldarian Empire that are coming to light because of this war. It sets the stage for a massive intergalactic crisis. In this entire series, entire worlds are burned out and are frozen to death. Kevin J. Anderson destroys worlds with the glee of Roland Emmerich destroying the entire planet in those movies that he makes. So this weaves an incredible tale with so many twists and turns. Within you have a huge amount of characters in this story. And the really cool thing about these books is that every chapter begins from a particular character's point of view, or really just centering on that character. The stories are told in the third person, but centering on a particular character and what's going on in their neck of the woods. Then the next chapter goes to another character, picking up where maybe a previous chapter earlier on left off with him or her, or even it. And you'll understand when you read it. So he has a very interesting way of weaving this tale by making it very personal. The involvement of each and every one of these players in the grand scheme of things. Some of these characters do die at some point. Others live, are sometimes irrevocably transformed through some really amazing things. So this series of books is something that just really, when I first read it, I really didn't think much of it. What attracted me, and I know, like we all say, never judge a book by its cover, but once again, the same as with the entire In the Rose series, I saw the cover of the book and it did attract me. Now, the attractiveness of the cover of a book does do wonders for its attractiveness to a reader if it's going to catch their eye. And I did read it, and it did pique my curiosity, but I wasn't sure if I'd wanted to buy it, so I rented it, borrowed it from the library. And when I read that first book, I was pretty much wowed. And it really wasn't until the second book came out that I actually had started reading them. And it really impressed me, Kevin J. Anderson's style of writing and what he did in these books, and how each book does end on a really big cliffhanger. So it does keep you wanting more. Kevin J. Anderson's really good about that. So, as I said, each book, very personal, centering on various characters in the story and all the changes that they go through, how the war changes them, or even ends up claiming their lives. Very, very interesting series of books that is amazing. Now, I want to go into some of the nuts and bolts because I'm just spinning my wheels right here. I want to go really into the pros and cons about the books. So, starting with the pros, Kevin J. Anderson knows how to make some fascinating characters. Both of the humans, the Eldirans, and even the tuckuss robots, which I don't want to give away too much of. But you'll see when it happens. The humans, like we said, in the Terran Hanseatic League are very interesting, and he does portray a differing of cultures somewhat among the human race. He doesn't delve too heavily into cultural aspects unless they're a very necessary part of what he is saying. though you can tell that it is that the human race has not become homogenized, especially a particular world which I have at this point kind of forgotten to mention. There is an independent world of humans called Theroc, which these humans from their generational ship had landed on, that is covered with this mysterious forest. They simply call it the World Forest. And they learned long ago that these trees are intelligent, are sentient on some level, and that these trees actually have occasionally choose humans. They wrap in a chrysalis of leaves and branches and fronds, and inject them with a symbiotic algae which turns their skin green, but also makes them part of the world forest. They are forever in. Anytime they make contact, physical contact with these trees, they are able to access the memories of this forest. And not only that, but the fronds of these trees, these seedlings that they bring to other worlds throughout the Hanseatic League and even on Ildira and its colony worlds, no matter where you are, the tree's mind is not limited by the vastness of space. So a green priest, say on Theroc, if they are in communication with a green priest on, say, Ildira, the homeworld of the Ildirans, they are able to communicate instantaneously from one point in the spiral arm, as they call it, to another. And so the green priests, which have become, which have become to call, are are very high in very high demand, despite the fact that most green priests tend to be homebodies. And so it does create sort of some tense political issues, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So you have a very dazzling array of unique, diverse characters and even cultures. They do talk a lot about Theroc and its unique cultures, and even the food they eat, and the flora and fauna of that planet, and actually flora and fauna of a whole bunch of different planets. Kevin J. Anderson really brings these worlds to life with his characters. He also, and this is one of my favorite things about Anderson, is that he knows how to get into the heads of his characters. Each one, their motives are very well understood, despite the fact that may not be always logical. But then, of course, he understands that we're human beings. Some of our motivations are not always going to be logical. My favorite character in this whole series is Chairman Basil Wenceslas, who is the chairman of the Terran Hanseatic League. And the book basically showcases his descent into madness as this war starts taking things out of his hands. And he's trying more and more desperately to keep things together and making foolish decision after foolish decision after foolish decision until basically he becomes little more than a mad dog that needs to be put down. But I don't want to spoil all that for you. You'll understand, because Anderson, what he does with the chairman is he's always talking about the rationalizations that the chairman gives to his horrendously foolish plans. And he's the guy in charge, so no one ever questions him. So it's very, very interesting how he gets into the heads of the various characters. Every single one. Wonderful with their plans, their plots, their wants, their desires, their rationalizations. Amazing. So, in each character, so very unique. I love it. Now, secondly, and of course, you're only going to expect this. This series, as you already expected, is a marvel of world building. In this case, worlds building. Some worlds, some planets, Anderson may not always focus as heavily on, but some when you were having a character that stays on a particular world for a long enough time, he really likes to go into the biologies and the sciences of this world and the various quirks and cultures and such of each planet. Ildira, for one, has 7 suns, which is, and the Saga of the Seven Sons is actually the name of the Ildiran history. It is a billion-line tome that supposedly catalogs the entire history of the Ildiran people. And so this planet, which has 7 suns, does not know night. So the Eldirans themselves are kind of have a deathly fear of the dark. And they also don't like to be alone. I'll talk about the Eldirans in a second. You have Tharok, like I said, with its world forest. You have the Earth with the palaces and such of the Terran Hanseatic League and a plethora of other worlds that Kevin J. Anderson talks about in great detail. The Eldirans are a really interesting race, and they actually were an inspiration for me for an alien race that I created for my Wild Space Saga webcomic. For those of you who are interested, I'll leave a link down in the doobly-doo. The Eldirans they look different depending on their function in society. These various groups of Eldiran are called kiths. They look as different from each other as oftentimes different breeds of dogs look from each other. You have the ruler kith, the nobility kith, which look the most human. And you have worker kiths, which are short and squat. You have the warrior kiths, which are beast-like. You have the lens kithmen, which are the religious caste that have large eyes. They're also, I believe, the scientists as well, which have very large eyes. You have the storyteller kith, I forget what the technical term for them was, but they have they are the ones who study and write the history of the Eldiran people, and they have lobes on their faces which actually glow different colors depending on their emotional state. Not only that, but the Eldirans are ruled by their emperor called the Mage Imperator. And all the Eldirans have a psychic bond with each other called Thism, which is all connected by way of the Mage Imperator, so that all Eldirans feel a kinship with each other. Violence between Eldirans is almost unheard of. It usually results with something really weird happening to them that disconnects them from the Thism. As a matter of fact, there is a side plot in the story involving an Eldiran nobleman who gets messed up in the head, but I don't want to reveal too much of that. So the Eldirans are a really fascinating race, and then you have, of course, the tuckuss robots, which reveal something as the story goes along, which, again, spoilers. But not only that, you also have, of course, the other races that the human race discovers along the way. And you will see, and not just the Hydrogues, but others, which turns this war into basically the definition of a cluster you-know-what. Okay, massive world building. And for those of you who are really into that thing, this will be your fantasy come true. Alright, so, and this actually covered a second thing I wanted to talk about because it has amazing and titanic alien races. Not only that, but it also has, like I said, a massive, this whole series of books is a massive star-spanning conflict. Entire worlds, even stars, are burned out or turned into ice, destroyed, torn apart in this conflict. It is amazing that the story progresses. Oh, and before I go on further, there is one other thing I forgot to talk about, and I cannot believe that it slipped my mind. I want to go back to the human race. When I talked about the Hanseatic League and also the Green Priests, the Tharok, there's a third faction, which are sort of the scapegoats of the human race. They're called roamers. They're basically space gypsies. These are humans from one of the generational ships that didn't find a homeworld. Well, what happens? They found a homeworld, but it came down with a particular virus. They couldn't stay on the planet, and so they made their way just in space, making their homes in the most uninhabitable places, but basically forging for themselves an entirely spacefaring civilization, which has helped the Hanseatic League before, but because they owe no allegiance to the Hanseatic League, the Hansa, as they're called, tend to treat them like a redheaded stepchild, basically. And out of the roamers come a lot of very interesting characters in the story. So I just wanted to mention that because it completely slipped my mind. But let's get back on track. So as I was saying, big, huge star-spanning conflict, entire planets get blown to ashes. Amazing. And another thing is it has really intriguing politics involving the humans and the Eldirans. Amongst the humans, like I said, it often stems from the whole issue of the chairman being the true power and the king being the figurehead. But one of the characters, King Peter, ends up making a lot of power plays against Basil and Cecilus, and it becomes a big, nasty chess game between the two. So you, as you're reading the whole war going on, you're seeing this kind of power struggle going on between the king, who actually has the love of the people, and Basil and Cecilus, who's really pulling the strings. And it's pretty harrowing, a lot of the stuff that the king goes through, especially when they find a wife for him and when other things start happening in the story. In the Eldiran Empire, a lot of stuff goes on involving one of the lost colonies of humans, a green priest who becomes the consort to the mage imperator, but what she ends up going through. And this is something I also forgot to talk about. Kevin J. Anderson seems to have I don't know, I want to call it a fetish, but I don't think it's that level. He always has a particular character in a lot of his stories that ends up basically going through their own personal hell, usually lasting for years, and then coming out the stronger for it. Nira is one of those characters. And I don't want to talk too much about her, but you'll see it happening in the story involving, and her story involves some of the intrigue that goes on among the Eldirans. And you'll understand when that happens as the story progresses. Now, let me see. Oh, now I'm done talking about the pros. I do want to talk a little bit about the cons in this. And really, there are two major things that stick out. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love Kevin J. Anderson's work. I really, truly do. But these are things that I've found in not only the Saga of the Seven Sons, but a lot of the work that he does. And it's prevalent in this one too. One is that some plot elements seem forced just to propel the story. You'll read some parts in his books where you'll feel that something's not right. That this just feels like something he kind of pulled out of his backside just to say, because the plot demands it, and he puts it in there. Now, it doesn't happen a lot, but there's like a couple of times where you're just looking at this and you're like, it just doesn't feel like it flows very naturally at all. It felt like he wrote himself into a corner and just kind of came up with this weird, a couple of things almost run a Deus Ex Machina. That doesn't happen a lot, fortunately, but when it does happen, it usually can tell, and it's like, oh, dude, that was kind of bad. The next one is that, and this is the one that really kind of can irk a person, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of some of his detractors can be so verbal about it. He does have a lot of detractors. Is that sometimes his characters can seem to do extremely stupid things for no other reason than it seems to just move the plot along. Now, interestingly enough, he's pretty aware of this, so it's not really going to be something that goes against that character's character. But it still just seems so abominably stupid, and yet it moves a plot point along, and you're like, why did he do this? And it really can bother you. Now, unfortunately, these have not been issues that have bothered me enough to spoil or sour my experience in these books. In these books, the pros by far outweigh the cons. And aside from these things, these issues, Kevin J. Anderson is a great writer. His writing is very easy to follow, very easy to read, and he really can easily get into his stories. I've read several of his books up to now, consisting of his Dune books, and also another story trilogy called the Terra Incognita trilogy, which I might talk about at a later point. The Saga of the Seven Sons is by far his best. And what can I say? I really give this series my highest recommendation. Despite the small flaws of Anderson, which can be grating on certain people, I really recommend give this series a try. 7 books long, so it makes for a very good reading. And unlike me, who had to wait with bated breath for a year until each book came out next, you all have the books all at once to read. Now, the prequel book, The Veiled Alliances, it's a little bit hard to find. You can still get it from off of Amazon. It's not absolutely necessary that you get it, but if you want to see some really beautiful artwork and a cool depiction of the Ildirans and such and their culture and Tharok and everything like that, then I highly recommend you check it out just for the artwork. The only problem I have for the artwork in this is done by some folks who did artwork for the Wildcats back in the late 90s, looks like. These people don't do faces all that well. I'm not talking about like just structure, we're just talking about expressions. The expressions you think they would have are not what comes out. Instead of being scared, the person looks like they just dropped a fat one. Sorry, but that's what it looks like. But that's really, like I said, another nitpick. So everyone, I believe I have talked about this series as much as I can. Oh, and by the way, for those who are looking at the picture that has accompanied this video, these are actually the covers for the UK releases for the books. In the US, they actually had a particular artist, and I think probably a particular company that had been working on the books, and they had to change it out, so they got a different artist. And it's really a crying shame, because the original covers are amazing, beautiful, artistic designs depicting various scenes from the from the books, from the prison palace on Ildira to the forest at Tharok to one of the abandoned Tuckuss worlds. And so when the books were picked up by another company, they replaced all the covers with just inane scenes of various planets and maybe a spaceship or two. And to me, I really didn't like that. Now, before I go, I just wanted to add this little addendum. Kevin J. Anderson has just released the beginnings of a new trilogy of books that tell a new story continuing after the Saga of the Seven Sons, called the Saga of Shadows. And all I'm going to tell you is that it has to do with a race that the Ildirans were terrified of, that were only mentioned in the Saga of the Seven Sons, called the Shana Ray. I'm not going to tell you any more about that. I really want you to check out the Saga of the Seven Sons first, and then go and check out the Saga of Shadows. It is, I've read the first book, which is called The Dark Between the Stars, and it is just as good as the books from the Saga of the Seven Sons, and opens up so much more of that universe. It felt like coming back home to a good friend. So that's about it, and thank you very much for listening to this book review. I sincerely hope that I've gotten you interested in checking out the Saga of the Seven Sons by Kevin J. Anderson, and if you've read it or would like to read it or have any questions or comments, as always, please leave them down below. As always, please keep it civil. Trolls will be blasterized. God, that sounded lame, but whatever. But thank you very much for listening, everyone. Once again, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. And until next time, as always, stay lucky and stay blessed.